Hello everyone and welcome to Baron's Den Top 10. Here on Baron's Den Top 10 we look at something and we rank them. We order them 1 to 10, our 10 favourites. And today we're looking at underrated Blood Bowl players. So what do I mean by underrated Blood Bowl players? I am certainly not talking about the 10 best Blood Bowl players in the game. No, definitely not. I'm talking about those players that are undervalued by some members of the community or even by most members of the community. Players that are much maligned for a weakness or because they don't compare favourably with one of their teammates. We're looking for those unloved heroes of the team. But in all of the cases I'm going to mention today, I would make a case that all of them have a point, a purpose, a place, and in some cases I would actually use them and say they are better than some of the other options that you have on that team. So let's get into the top 10 Blood Bowl underrated players. But before we get on to our top 10 most underrated players, I just wanted to mention two honourable mentions. The first of which is the Necromantic Flesh Golem. Now, this guy didn't quite make the top 10 because I think most Necromantic teams, you would find people using them. You do see them a lot, and I think they are reasonably well liked. But the reason I consider putting them in underrated is they usually are the positional that is left out in a starting 11. Not seen as valuable as the werewolf or the wraith. And the truth of that is that that's correct. It isn't. It doesn't have the impact that the other two players do have, but it is still a mighty player. Strength 4 and stand firm with regeneration just means it's an absolute tank. It's got high armour. It's like a souped up zombie. And when it comes to being the corners of cage or anchoring your front line, they are brilliant. So they are underrated. Often in sevens, I took one in a sevens team, and a lot of people were really surprised by that because I took one over a werewolf. But I just decided that I only needed the one werewolf, and I wanted the flesh golem as a strength 4 piece with fewer members. In the end, I ended up winning 3 out of my 4 games, so it didn't go too bad. So yes, flesh golems, a little bit underrated, but not enough to be in the top 10. And the other one I've got to mention is the Goblin Hooligan. Again, I think you'd see most people wanting to run this player. But the reason I was tempted to put it in the top 10 most underrated players is because there are some people who ignore it, who don't use it, who think that it's got an inflated value. Because your regular Goblin's costing 40,000, this guy is costing 65. And in a team where you really are dependent on your inducements, some people just aren't willing to use a lot of these positionals that are more expensive. But it's crazy if you ask me, because one of the first skills you'd be wanting to give one of your goblins is Sneaky Git and Dirty Player. Now, Dirty Player is a secondary skill for a goblin. So for a goblin to get up to Dirty Player without randoming it would cost them 80,000 then. That would be the value of the player. 40 for its base cost and then 40 for adding a secondary skill. This Hooligan comes with Dirty Player for just 25,000 extra, and then you can throw in Disturbing Presence as well. Is Disturbing Presence the be-all end-all? No, of course it isn't. However, it will come in handy now and then, especially for a player who's going to be hanging around the middle, hiding behind your backlines, waiting to go in there and stick the boot in. Once you've got Sneaky Git, which is just one primary level up, this guy is an absolute beauty. So yes, he's not in the top 10 because I think a lot of people would agree with me, but there are still some out there that do not see the value of this player, which I just think is crazy. So let's get on to the top 10. And in number 10 spot we have the Dwarf Death Roller. Controversial pick straight away, but there are a lot of people in the community that just write the Death Roller off straight away. And there's two main components as to why this is the case. First of all, there is the fact that it is a secret weapon, which means that after a drive it's going to get sent off, unless you have bribes or you are lucky and you argue the call, which is a rolling of a 6. So that's one part of the problem. The other part of the problem is its value. 170,000 makes it, I think, the most expensive non-star player in the game. Now, just to put that into perspective, you are sinking 170,000 in to a player who will only play at most one half if you don't utilise bribes or argue the call. And sometimes it's even less than that. If you start with it and you score, that's going to be less. Or if you are forced to deploy it towards the end of a half when your opponent has scored and you've lost players to injuries. So there are lots of pitfalls with using the Death Roller. However, it is underrated because aside from Secret Weapon, it does absolutely make up for that cost. Because, let's go through it here. It is Strength 7, Armour 11 plus, Break Tackle, Dirty Play, Juggernaut, Mighty Blow, Stand Firm. All amazing skills for a player that's going to be fouling and taking people down. Now, it does have no hands, but you don't need him to have hands. Just like you don't care that it's got a 5+ agility. You're not even that bothered that it's only movement 4. The other downside is learner 5+ means you are probably not using rerolls at all on this player. So every now and then, double scores is going to happen and it's going to ruin your day. But for what you get, as long as this player can delete 1 or 2 players from your opposition's team, it doesn't matter if he gets sent off. And plus, you can go after those really important players. You can target them, get a War Dancer down, and then run him over with this guy. It's just, I think they are underrated. And the problem you do see with dwarves is that people prefer the consistency and the safety of your average team. And that's understandable, but I think dwarves are quite a cheap team. You already get quite a lot at a reasonably low cost, and you can operate them at a low TV, and then you can add this guy on it as the spice. So he's not higher in this list because I do understand the pitfalls of using him, but if you can use him well, especially if you end up getting a bribe, this player will do you so much good on your team. You just need to know how to use him. Okay, on to number 9. In 9th spot we have the Wood Elf Treeman, and I'm being more specific to the Wood Elf Treeman than the Old Wood Alliance or Halfling Treeman. And the reason I say that is a lot of people wouldn't bother putting the Treeman in their Wood Elf team. They see it as slow, unreliable, and bashing when that's not part of the Wood Elf game to bash. I wholeheartedly disagree with this. I think a Treeman is amazing on a Wood Elf team. I think you deploy him on the line, he's saving a Wood Elf life every turn. Every turn, instead of an armour 8+ player, you've got an armour 11+ player. Yes, he doesn't move very far, but the rest of your team does. So he can just operate in the middle. Even if he takes root, he is a roadblock. He's not even as expensive as some of the other players. He's cheaper than the War Dancer. And yet he's giving you strength 6. He's giving you some much needed clout with Mighty Blow. He is making up for some of the things that the rest of your team just can't do. He can get guard. He can get other strength skills. Yes, okay, you're not making the use of his throw teammate and his strong arm, but that doesn't matter. He's still really worthwhile having around on your team. I would always use one. In my Wood Elf playthrough, I even started with one. That's probably more up to debate about whether that's a good idea. But at some point, you definitely should consider using a Wood Elf Treeman. Don't listen to the naysayers who say to not bother with one. I promise you'll have fun if you do. Is he the best player on the team? Of course not. Could he add some value to your team? Definitely. Okay, number 8. It's the Minotaur. Or should I say, all Minotaurs. I can't believe I'm putting this in here. There was a time where I think people just loved Minotaurs. Whereas now, more often than not, I see people passing up on the Minotaur, whether that's the Chaos Chosen team or the Chaos Renegade team. They will see other big guys as a more viable option. And that's possibly because it's got the Rat Ogre and the Ogre to compete with. The Ogre is more consistent than him, and the Rat Ogre will always do what you want it to do as long as you're happy for him to shred his own teammates. So the Minotaur kind of fits in the middle of this. But why did I put him in my underrated players then? I've put him there because I actually think he's one of the best big guys still. Because, and it comes down to this, Unchanneled Fury. A lot of people see this as his biggest weakness. I see it, as long as you use it well, as one of the saving graces. With Unchanneled Fury, if he fails that, he still keeps his tackle zones. So if he's into combat, or if he's blocking a route for another player, he's not going to bonehead and lose his tackle zones. He's not going to lose his ability to guard. He's not going to lose other abilities. He's still in the hunt. He just refuses to do what he's told. Now, you also want to be blitzing with this guy as much as you can, so you're probably going to be rolling that on a 2+ anyway. Not to mention the fact that his horns gives him a strength 6 on the blitz, which means he's a good counter to other big guys. He still comes with his mighty blow. He does have frenzy as well. Again, frenzy can be seen as a curse or a talent depending on the type of player you are. But again, you can work around frenzy, and you can work frenzy into your own benefit. Add a few skills onto this guy, such as block or juggernaut, then get stand firm, so you can send him surfing players off, and they'll try and counter surf you, and your stand firm will keep you in the hunt as long as there's no opposition juggernaut. You can look at pro to make him more reliable, so the Unchanneled Fury doesn't come in to play. And I just feel he is brilliant on either a Chaos Chosen or a Chaos Renegade team. The thing to remember as well, I suppose, is that he has slightly less armour. But that's no worse than the Rat Ogres, and only one worse than the Ogre. So you should have to look after him a bit more, but I do think he is one of those underrated big guys. At number 7, we have Trolls. And I do mean Trolls, all of them. Whether it's Underworld, Orc, Chaos Renegade, or even when they come Goblins, I feel Trolls are underrated. And the reason they're underrated is they're not as good as the other big guys. That is a fact. And the reason they're not as good is they have the worst Negatrait, and they also have some of the worst stats. Not for armour. You know, they are strength 5, but their agility isn't very good. They're pretty slow, and they're stupid. And they're really hungry. So they're not as reliable at even throwing things. However, the reason they've made my underrated list is because, for a big guy, they're pretty cheap. And, more often than not, you'll find that they are pretty useful even when they're not doing anything. Not being stupid, but not doing anything, so not activating them. They're really good passive players. You can stick skills like Guard, and then if it's a mutated troll, things like Tentacles, things that are going to really get in the way. I think on an Underworld team, the thing to remember with the Troll over the Rat Ogre is it opens up the throw teammate game, whereas the Rat Ogre, yes, definitely more powerful and more reliable if you're willing to kill your own teammates, but this guy is the only option if you would want to throw teammates around. So I think the Troll is probably more fun. Do I think he's better than the Rat Ogre? Not necessarily, but I don't think he's unviable. He's definitely a viable option. In the Orc team, a lot of people don't bother with him because he adds too much value. I'd say he does bring value. Get Guard on a Troll, stick him at the front, and again, he's adding to that wall of pain that your big uns and your blitzers are going to be dishing out. On a Chaos Renegade team, again, he's a viable option because he does something perhaps different to all the others, and that is be the anvil in the centre of your game that's going to hold players in place and allow the more, what's the word I'm looking for? Glamorous, let's say, of big guys to do the blitzing, to do the clever shenanigans, while this Troll just sits there and does its duty. And, if you need him to, he can even chuck a Goblin. So for that reason, I'm putting Trolls at number 7 of my most underrated player. And at number 6 we have the Skaven Thrower. Well, it's the first non-big guy on my list. I just realised I had 4 big guys there in a row. But this is the first non-big guy in the top 10 of underrated players. My top 10 anyway. Now, you might be looking at this thinking, wow, why is he in the underrated box? He's got pretty good skills. For a thrower, he's pretty good. He comes with Passion Sure Hands. He's not bad. So why is he undervalued? And the reason he's undervalued is because he's not a gutter runner. Now, in the old days of Blood Bowl 2 and of Blood Bowl 2016 and the CRP before that, often throwers weren't utilised by Skaven coaches because your gutters could pick up the ball in 2+, they could move 9, they could dodge way better, and they could pass just as well. And that will change with the passing stat. That means that the gutter runners are now quite considerably worse than the throwers at the passing game, which isn't necessarily the end of the world. You don't need to pass the ball. However, I now think having at least one thrower is really important. It comes with sure hands and pass. He's a 2+ passer, which means if you need that little bit of stretch play, particularly if you're going coast to coast with gutter runners, he can be really useful. And with a couple of skills, he can also be quite a deadly thrower of the ball. So you might want block on him to make him harder to hit. You could pick up extra arms, so you're picking up on a 2+. And then with your sure hands as well, that's a virtually guaranteed pickup. You could also look at getting accurate or a passing increase, so that you're almost guaranteeing with, again, the pass skill, a 2+ pass at either quick or short range. Cannoneer means you could even be throwing it long bombs on a 4+ with a reroll. That's a 75% chance of success. Now, if you've got gutters all flooding into the enemy's half, and maybe one of them's got nerves of steel, the opposition's going to have a nightmare trying to know who to mark, who to blitz, to stop you from throwing that in and scoring. So there are so many things you can do with a thrower, and he's only, 35k more than a lineman, so alright, you could almost get 2 linemen for that, but he is giving you something that the other players don't. So number 6 on my list is the Skaven Thrower. Number 5, the Chameleon Skink. Oh, look at him go. I love the Blood Bowl 3 model of the Chameleon Skink. So, breaking now into the top 5 underrated players is the Chameleon Skink. Why is the Chameleon Skink underrated? Again, because he's not a regular skink. How dare they take a skink, increase its value by 10,000, and knock its movement down? What are we doing? Why would you take that? Well, okay, you've lost the movement and he's 10k more. But let's talk about what you do get. You get an increase in the passing stat. Is that the be-all end-all? Well, not necessarily. But he comes with on the ball and he comes with shadowing. Now, shadowing, not as useful, but at movement 7, there's going to be a time where you really annoy the opposition by, they try and dodge away, you can follow up. But this on the ball is really useful, and it means you've got one player who can make that extra 3 squares of movement. Now, it only has agility primary access, but it does have passing access as well. So you can even open up to give yourself a thrower, which isn't necessarily the best way to go. But again, if you've given accurate to this guy, and he's now a 2+, 3+ passer, that means you've got another 6 squares of moving that ball along in just one turn. You could look as well to get sure hands, so he picks it up better, and he could be with on the ball as well. He could be really good at fetching the ball no matter where it is and moving on to the next player that you want to have it. Okay, so I just feel that one Chameleon Skink isn't going to hurt as an inclusion. I think it offers something different, and it gives you that little bit of, the opposition will know what you're doing with skinks. Because the Chameleon Skink isn't as widely used, they might not see it as a threat that it could be. So I would always have at least one Chameleon Skink in my team, and just look at him. He's just cool. At number 4, we have the Halfling Hefty. One of my favourite little players. Look at him. He's an absolute legend. So, why is it on my underrated list? I'll tell you why. A lot of people wouldn't bother with them. They'd see the fact that it costs 20k more than a normal Halfling and think, well, what do you get? You get Fend, you get 1 point of armour, and you lose right stuff, so you can't even throw him. What's the point in him? I don't like him. Well, to those people I say, I'll tell you why you take him, because he has passing on a primary access, which means you get much easier access to leader, which gives you another reroll. Now, people might not see that as brilliant, and it's not even my secret real reason why I love Halfling Hefties. The real reason I love Halfling Hefties is because I would want to change one into a thrower. I love the idea of a Halfling thrower of the ball. But passing 3+ and passing primary access, you can turn this little dude into a right little thrower. Again, it's not the optimum way to go. It's not the strongest player in the world, but you'll be surprised how often an 8+ armour is going to save this guy more than the 7+. Fend as well can be extremely irritating. Are those 3 things, passing, access, fend, and an increase in armour worth the extra 20k? In my opinion, for 1 or 2 players, it is. I don't think it's going to make the real end of difference between what inducements you can take, and I'd always take them. And also, just look at him. He's just cool. He looks proper hard for a little halfling, and I love that. I mean, I'd want to stick him on the line, but he's not going to last very long, I suppose, if he does. Maybe you could put 1 on the line and have 1 in the back as your thrower. Either way, he's a bit of fun. He isn't the best, but he's definitely underrated. You can do things with his halfling hefty. Oh, we're getting really into it now. We're into the top 3. And this next one is very, very dear to my heart. It is the mighty Beerbo. Oh, yes. Look at him. Now, I've played quite a lot of tournaments with Norse, tabletop tournaments, and I can tell you, the Beerbo is most definitely underrated. I remember when he was first leaked, they first leaked this, people were up in arms about this. Why is there an animal player? Look at his stats, he's going to be terrible. Let's get one thing straight. He is terrible. I mean, look at him. Movement 5, Strength 1, Edge 3+, can't pass, Armour 6+. His player development, he can't even get access to any skills on a primary. You'd have to save up 12 SPP before he can get his first skill. He comes with Dodge, No Hands, Pick Me Up, Stunty, and Titchy. So you just look at it on paper, you think, waste of time. But this player has so much use. I'd say it's got 3 core reasons why you'd include it. Reason number 1. He's only 20k, so actually, in a tournament roster, you can use this as one of your players instead of a lineman that's 50k, and it means that you can squeeze more of those positionals into your starting 11. Or, if you want to take a star player, you can use 2 of these to count as your 10th and 11th man, and then you'll have enough money to utilise the star player. So from a team building point of view, the Beerbo is really useful. Reason number 2 is he's a great little fowler. Being stunty and titchy, he can get into anywhere on a 2+. He can sit around, go in, put the boot in, and come back out again. And if he gets sent off, you're not going to care. Yes, you're not going to get dirty player on this guy, but you could end up getting sneaky git on him. Having a little sneaky git Beerbo going around fouling people at just 20k is a bargain. Of course, he'd be more like 60k then. So maybe you'd consider not bothering with sneaky git. But even so, as somebody who can go in, foul, and if he gets sent off, you don't care. And reason number 3, you know what? I've just thought of a 4th reason as well. Reason number 3 is he actually has a skill, Pick Me Up, where you can pull up prone players on a 5+ at the beginning of your turn that were within 3 squares of him. Now, that doesn't happen very often, but you've got all these other reasons why the Beerbo can be really useful. Having that as well isn't going to hurt. Now and then, that's going to be an absolute dream for you. You're going to be able to pick somebody up who can then get their blocking, or you'll be able to pick someone up who'll then be able to do their full movement to where you want them to go. And it'll be down to your little Beerbo. And the extra reason I thought is, and this was a big one that came up in my tournaments, you'd be surprised how much of a distraction these guys are. People will see them and think, oh, Armour 6+, I'm going to kill that boar. And so they spend their time going around trying to kill him. And actually, he's very low threat, really, unless he's been very successful sticking the boot in. So he can become quite a distraction. Anyway, for all those reasons, and I have first-hand tournament experience of this, Beerbos are definitely underrated, and they can be really, really useful. And at number 2, it's the Orc Thrower. Now, this guy has been underrated for a long time. He was even underrated in the older editions. And the reason he is because, simply, he's not Armour 10+. So straight away, people will prefer linemen and blitzers over the thrower. They won't see the value because they'll think he's soft, he's easy to take out, and he's not as quick as a blitzer. But let's look at what he does do. He gives you sure hands, straight off the bat. And for me, that's invaluable on an Orc team. Yes, he's Armour 9+, but let's not forget, Armour 9+ is still better or as good as most of the team's general armour. There's not many teams, Dwarves and Orcs, and a few Strength 4 guys, are the only ones who've got better armour than this guy anyway. So he's not bad, certainly not bad. Movement 5, again, as quick as the rest of your team, it's only the blitzers that are quicker. But that sure hands means he can pick up the ball. And you know what? Alright, because of animosity and a 3+ passing skill, he's not a great thrower of the ball. You don't need him to be. He can be a runner. But you have the option of a pass in case you need it. Maybe you need to score in one turn. You know, maybe you've got to try and get the ball out of your area. Having somebody who actually can throw the ball might be useful. Now, the other thing to bear in mind, well, surely I can just put sure hands on a blitzer. You can. There's nothing wrong with that. You might still want to do that as well. But having another piece that comes with sure hands, particularly when you're starting out, is really useful. The other thing to bear in mind with your blitzers is you might want them doing other jobs. Giving them sure hands does mean that's a skill like tackle or mighty blow or guard that you're not using, or even dodge. You've given sure hands to that slot. Do you need to? Still questionable. Am I saying the Orc Thrower is the better way to go? Not necessarily. But I'm saying he is underrated. There are people out there that would never use him. I would definitely include one in my team. So from as far as I'm concerned, he is an underrated player. And finally, we have reached number 1. The most underrated player in Blood Bowl, in my opinion, and this will probably upset a lot of people. It is the Dark Elf Assassin. Now, let's be clear again, the criteria here. I am not saying this is the best player in Blood Bowl. Not by a long shot. What I am saying is, I think he is one of the most overlooked players in Blood Bowl. I think he is somebody who is straight away ignored because of historical things that have been said about him that people think that he's not useful, that he doesn't add that quality, that other players in the team are better. But let me tell you, the Assassin, for me, just one, you don't necessarily need two, just one, gives you something very different. And that is stab. The amount of very annoying players there are in Blood Bowl who will get blodge, which means they'll be very hard to knock down. It's just that they're all over the place. There's whole teams that have dodge and block. You're going to have, and this is not just Blood Bowl 3, but tabletop as well. You've got Snotlings, you've got Amazons, you've got Goblins, you've got Wood Elves and Skaven. All these teams where players either start with dodge or block and can get the other one very quickly. What I'm saying is having somebody who can just go and ignore block and dodge and give them a good stabbing is really useful, particularly when nearly all those players I mentioned have armour 8+ or less. And anyone who plays as Wood Elves, as I've found out, when people roll 2 dice against 8+, quite often it will break it. Now, you have to be clever with how you use them, because obviously if it fails, you need to be then prepared for a counter-attack. But this is just the stabbing point of view. I'm going to talk about him outside of that, and that is his movement set. Compared to a lineman, for example, he's movement 7, so he's 1 square quicker just to lose 1 bit of armour. For me, that's a worthwhile trade-off on one player. Yes, it's okay, we've lost an armour point, but this player is quicker. And that, of course, makes shadowing more effective than it was in 2016, when he was only movement 6. So that helps with that. Is shadowing the best in the world? No. But if you've got a Snotling or an annoying player who's trying to dodge away, but movement 7, you've got a chance of basically following that player and forcing more dice rolls. And dice rolls could end up being the downfall of people. Now, the other thing to remember is you can also, with general and agility access, you can whack, block and dodge on this guy. And then all of a sudden you've got a movement 7 blodger that dodges on a 2+. So he's a pretty handy goal scoring threat as well. Yes, you might want to lean more into the assassin side of things with multiple block, or with or make them more of a difficult player to dodge away from with diving tackle. There are lots of options you can do, but I certainly think there's place in your Dark Elf team for one assassin. The big question is, would you ever start with one? And most people would definitely say no. Even I would probably say maybe you wouldn't put one in your starting 11, but I would definitely look to include one at some point. I'm going to put one in my starting 11 just because I love the assassins, and maybe I'm a little bit clouded by that. But I think more and more over time now, people are starting to become aware that the assassin actually isn't too much of a problem. The other difference between him and a lineman is just 15,000. So for 15,000, you're getting the swap on movement and armour, and you're gaining stab and shadowing. I think that's a fair trade-off for just one player. So, that is my top 10 most underrated Blood Bowl players. Now, it's mainly just a little bit of fun, this. It is, of course, only my opinion. Remember, I'm not saying that these players are the best players in the game. I'm saying for some reason they are overlooked and underrated a little bit. Some of them are still hard to use, but you can make use of these guys and really pull off some different things than you could if you ignored them completely. Now, I'm sure there'll be lots of people out there who would disagree with what I've said, and if you do, then by all means, post in the comments, tell me what would be your top 10 most underrated players. Whether you agree with the players that I've chosen, whether you disagree and you think these players are absolute trash, by all means, post a comment, let me know what you think, and we can have a little bit of a discussion. As beauty of Blood Bowl is, it's such a well-balanced game that you can have these debates of, whether a player is as useful as another, because the honest answer is there's probably a marginal difference between it. However, that's going to be it from me. I hope you enjoyed that top 10, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you did, and I'll see you all on the next video. Thank you very much. Bye.